Hi, it's Jessica Walden, President of the Greater Macon Chamber of Commerce, here with our Government and Military Affairs Chair, Chrissy Miner. And this is one of your final advocacy updates because we are at the end of the General Assembly session.
How about that?
Let's recap just a few things that are on their way to the governor's desk that made it through sine die, which, Chrissy, I was at the Capitol for sine die. It was an interesting day. It did end early, and the big thing was when that budget passed, it was almost time to go home.
There
were some few key highlights that did pass. So what do we want to talk about?
Well, over roughly 400 bills and resolutions passed this session, so they were busy. That is the bottom line. And beginning on April 9th, ending March 14th, is the 40-day period. The governor can sign these bills, he can veto them. If he does nothing, they automatically become law. So we're going to watch that. So far we've only had two that were signed, House Bill 111 and 112. And what those do is ultimately they accelerate the reduction of the income tax rate to 5.19 from a 5.75. So that's a great reduction there. And it also gives a third one-time, you heard that right, third one-time tax credit to taxpayers who paid taxes in 2023 and 2024. Single filers will get a $250 refund and married will get a $500 refund.
So a lot of people have a reason to watch the mailbox again on that one. The other thing, of course, that we watched carefully was SB 68 and 69. That was the tort reform omnibus package and the third-party litigation funding. The sponsor on that was our own Senate President Pro Tem John Kennedy. So thank you for the work on that. It was supported, of course, by our chamber as well as the Georgia Chamber and chambers across the state of Georgia. We do expect that to be signed, probably with a little bit more fanfare than the others.
I would definitely expect some type of big conference to signing conference for that. Another thing, speaking of Senate Pro Tem Kennedy, is the Senate Bill 123 that he carried, and that's an absenteeism bill. And what that is essentially, school districts cannot expel children solely based on absenteeism. They have to have some different degrees of intervention throughout the process before they expel a student for being absent. So that is also up for signing from the governor's desk as well.
Well, that's a good one, and that, of course, falls along our legislative priorities for workforce and education. And that gives us a chance to say in August we will be addressing education at our Macon and Eggs program. So the other thing I want to mention, this was one that was watched by businesses, was the Open Records Act. SB 12, it did make it. It aims to clarify the legislative intent behind Georgia's Open Records Act, specifying that any open records request must go through a public entity or agency rather than the entity's private contractor. So that was something that was costing businesses some money. That's one piece of it. Another one that we were definitely watching in the workforce arena was the child care tax credit. That did pass, SB 89. Details on that you will find in this newsletter. What else do you want to highlight?
Well, the school safety bill was another one that has passed. That's House Bill 268. It adds mental health coordinators to schools. It ensures the swift transfer of records in between school districts, which is very important, so you don't have that lack. It also establishes threat assessment levels as well for school districts to follow, and sets also standards for physical infrastructure and security within schools. So a very important bill for the safety of our children.
Right, and then I would dovetail that with, let's see, SB 81, sponsored by Bethany Ballard, that was a school psychologist interstate compact. That one's awaiting governor's signature, and create a system for school psychologists to practice across state lines more easily. Very similar to what she did with licensure last year. So thank you for that.
Well, since we're talking about school, let's talk about the Distraction-Free Education Act, which basically takes away the smartphones from kids from kindergarten through 8th grade. You're going to have to leave the cell phones at home, kids.
Yeah.
You know, no talking to your kids until they're in high school, parents.
Distraction-free driving, distraction-free learning.
That's right.
Because we want to be the top state for talent, and the Top State for Talent Act, HB 192, you will see that is in this newsletter as well with further information. It did pass, and it focuses on programs of study for grades 6 through 12 to align with the high demand career list published by our State Workforce Development Board. We're trying to align our education with our economy, and this is definitely marking one of our major priorities in our legislative priorities.
Well, speaking of workforce, another great news story is they upped the limit for military retirement tax exemption. So now it is up to $65,000. So if you retired from service, your retirement income will be exempt up to $65,000 a year.
That's great clarity on that one. Something we watch closely. We're
did.
hoping for make us just as competitive with other defense communities who want to
Absolutely.
keep our very young retirees here and in our workforce. Okay, so there is some occupational licensing that passed, again, mirroring what happened last year. You'll see those details in there. We're also going to include the recommended scorecard bills that didn't pass, something that we hope to see either return or reworked. One of those in particular that we were watching and supporting was second chance hiring, reducing, again, barriers in occupational licensing for people with who are looking for second chance employment. So that was one, and we'll continue to follow those, and you'll see that full list here in the newsletter.
On the federal side.
Yeah, moving on to the federal side. Now that
so-
session's over, we will move on to the federal side. You will see information in this newsletter about Party for the Park, a chance to show your support for our Mulgi National Park and Preserve Initiative. And I would just say keep an eye on this, because the plan is that legislation will move through committee this summer. So support the park while you can. The fundraiser information's in this newsletter, and we'll continue to keep you updated on that.
So we have until May 14th to see what happens, what goes, what doesn't. But
That's
it's been a
signed.
pleasure joining you throughout this time.
Yeah.
And obviously any questions you have, reach out to us. We're happy to answer them.
It was a fast 40 days, at least from this side.
Oh, sure was. Absolutely.
Thanks.